Hi, and welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Emma Lomax and me, Lisa Fine. We are sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights and produced by Tom Fox and the Compliance Podcast Network. Today's guest is Karen Bertha. She has worked in various roles in government contracting, technology, healthcare, and most recently at V2X. Karen has built world-class programs and focused in a number of different areas. Right now, she is doing something that I think is really important for all of us, which is taking stock and, to quote another great woman in compliance, taking the power of the pause. Thank you, Lisa Beth Lantini Walker, for that, which we'll talk to you about in more detail after we get started. So first of all, Karen, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to get to talk to you today. And can you tell us a little bit about you and how you got into compliance?
Absolutely. Greetings and salutations, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be with you today and happy Corporate Ethics and Compliance Week. Yahoo! I entered the world of ethics and compliance with a background in accounting and auditing right around the time of the Caremark decision while working for a large health insurer. And in that role, I helped develop and support proactive programs for all of their health plans. And that's when I determined that I love the work and returned to school to learn a little bit more. Since then, I've helped large consumer products companies and defense organizations develop programs in addition to developing training and consulting with organizations on program assessments. My most recent position that you just mentioned was eliminated post acquisition. And this is not unusual post acquisition, especially when ethics and compliance is not involved in due diligence.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've talked a bit about when you do involve ethics and compliance, and then the other times where it may not come into conversation, and then it becomes a really big problem in integration, which can often become a concern from either or both sides. But one of the other things in the prior roles, defense organizations you mentioned, B2X, is that you've worked in highly regulated industries like healthcare and government contracting, and also in some less highly regulated ones. And I've noticed this. I'm in an organization that's publicly traded, but on the other hand, it's in education technology. So it's not in the highly recognized world of like pharma or other things. And in those businesses, it's critical to follow compliance to be able to do the business. And in other organizations, you really have to sell compliance because I always see it in highly regulated industries as when you say, if compliance says jump, you say how high because you might go out of business.
Sure.
In others, they will say to you, so why am I jumping? Why aren't I just walking over there? Why do I have to jump now? So do you think first of all, is that an accurate perception? And then can you talk a little bit about how you would handle that? So,
So the short answer is it depends. But with that in mind, I think it matters why an organization is looking to fill a role and the circumstances, right? So is it voluntary or involuntary? Is it a new role or is it a backfill? And if it's voluntary, organizations are typically open and eager to do the right thing. And not that they're not eager to do that when it's involuntary. It's just a very different type of energy, period. So I think it depends. And I've handled it a number of different ways in those circumstances. Um, and I think it's pretty easy to say it just makes good business sense. Um, all organizations understand that, and every industry can cite examples of non-compliant and unethical behavior that's been detrimental to an organization, but it's far more beneficial to approach it from a risk mitigation perspective and making sure that you speak the language of the leadership and leaders understand risk. And so it's just really crucial to emphasize that.
and I'm going to ask you a little follow up about that too. I know you say
Sure.
voluntary versus involuntary, but another one I live on is never waste a good crisis. So if the government or if something raises the issue for you, it may not be voluntary. But in that situation, I find that involuntary. If something goes wrong, and not even
Yes.
government or something else, policy procedure that costs money or goodwill or problems or gets you in trouble, not doing the right thing, I tend to notice that actually also makes involuntary turn into voluntary fairly quickly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and suddenly the bright lights are there, and why haven't we been doing this all of the time? And it's easy to encourage those organizations to move forward with an effective and efficient program.
Find
You never
resources
wanna
show up then too.
How about that? You never wanna waste a good opportunity.
No, but I do think that sometimes in that I would like to, you have to also kind of start writing these things out and detailing and planning for them.
Yes.
So that when it does happen, when someone comes back and asks you, why haven't we done this? You say, here are the tools we can use without saying, I told you. How do you do
Right.
that?
That you have to be creative in how you present that information. And but I also think, like you said, it's a great opportunity and you can easily leverage what you have, but it's also helpful when you have done assessments, recognized where you have some opportunities in your program, and then that's when you put it right in there. This is how we can enhance what we have, and these are the expected results when we do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I know we touched on this a few minutes ago, but I'd love to go back and talk to a little bit. One of your areas that I know you speak regularly on and has been a part of your career has been the area of like due diligence and both pre and post acquisition due diligence. Sometimes there are reasons where compliance may be less involved in pre acquisition, and part if there's NDAs or confidentiality, or if you have a law firm inside, and that causes some of the other issues. But sometimes it causes issues then with post acquisition and integration if you don't know anything until you are involved in it. So, yeah, how do you think compliance is best suited to be involved and a part of the process?
My perspective is that compliance needs to be involved early. In a word, early. We need to have a seat at the table and absolutely positively should be an integral part of the due diligence team and the process because it's important that organizations recognize that it- what you find may not be a deal breaker, but it could be costly to remedy, both financially and reputationally. And our early involvement is crucial in the due diligence process.
Yeah. Now, for reasons I said before, or other reasons, sometimes that doesn't happen. I referenced a story once where I came back and I knew there was some stuff that was potentially going on. And I was on vacation. I came back and somehow I had a leading role in the integration. And I think the whole team nearly
Mhm.
put their head in their hands. And I was like, wait, where are the employees? That was
Oh,
like,
what?
but that happens sometimes. I
Yes.
mean, it does. It's not, and there are, again, sometimes valid reasons, whether or not where they think so. When you get handed that nice little project and it's now owned by your organization, what do you do to jump in and be able to handle that and be effective?
Yeah. So what you have to do is work quickly and efficiently because you kind of are on a timeline. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about safe harbor, but you've got to quickly take a step back, understand the why of the M&A activity, and then go to work. And then go to work and making sure that you are building a plan that will deliver value ultimately. That includes doing a good deal, but building a compliance risk profile to really drive that integration plan.
And then what you've got in your integration plan, what do you think are some of the most important parts of that?
Yeah. So, as a part of the integration plan, you want to identify the gaps in the policies and procedures, in your controls, identifying redundancies and opportunities for system consolidations and efficiencies, and create a project plan that will help you to close those gaps and identify the owners and timelines as you look to roll out that plan. And then, of course, you execute it. But you want to make sure, as a part of that integration plan, that you post execution test all that you've put into place to ensure that it is efficient and effective, and continue to monitor those activities going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And ideally, you'll bring them into the organization. And one of the things that always amazes me is that people think, okay, we have all these systems and it'll work out great. We'll put them on payroll. And then that doesn't play out quite as easily as people anticipate. So
The system integration, I can tell you firsthand, is one of the most difficult components of the plan to integrate. By golly, you can have 6 or 7 different systems working at the same time, duplicating efforts left and consuming lots of resources. And so that is challenging, and partnership with IT is absolutely critical.
yeah. So you then we talked about or started talking about the DOJ safe harbor reference. It's a more interesting thing. But earlier this year, as part of the disclosure, promoting early disclosure when you find post acquisition or other information. How do you think of that? Is that helpful to compliance officers? Is it a concern because sometimes there's this, okay, we've got 120 days now. So
Let me just say this, that the safe harbor provision incentivizes organizations to provide a seat at the table for compliance. And it is absolutely in our best interest to be there. And I'm grateful, if you will, for the provision, but the key is to be there and to not be excluded.
I think that and I think the other part is people can't think that means you can ease up on what you're doing pre-acquisition because it's not the safe harbor isn't a safe harbor to remove responsibilities.
That's correct. And because the clock starts ticking, and you've really got to get in there and be ready to execute. The time gets away very quickly, particularly when you don't know all of the players, who's on first and what their responsibilities are. And so you've got to get in there quickly and identify any red flags.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot about some of the things you've done while you were in these various roles and all these things, excuse me. And then, but when I started talking about the power of the pause. And that for you is taking some time to address some other things that have gone on in your life. And I think the reason I think this is such an important topic is that I think a lot of people go out there and somehow think that they can't do this or that life won't let them do this. And I think it's really important to be open when you choose. I've had some breaks that have changed my life. And I think I know it gives people courage to take those steps. So will you tell us about yours and what kind of your process right now in your journey?
Yeah. Yeah. So there is incredible power in the pause. Personally, I've had several life changing events that coincidentally needed attention at a time when I was actually afforded a pause, if you will. So I have been able to address them. But I've also had the time to do some professional upskilling. It's all a balance, and time management is critical, uh, any way you look at it. And but with that, because when you're in the throes of the daily work routine and fighting compliance fires, it's often little time to really focus on skill building. And so you might be able to catch a webinar here or there if you're lucky and get away for a conference, but there's so many distractions begging for your attention. But when you have the opportunity to take a pause and get a little downtime, you're open to do a number of things. So you can actually attend those webinars and conferences with your full attention versus checking email and between breaks in a conference and that type of thing. So you can really focus. There's always emerging legislation and interesting readings. And during the normal course of the day, you may or may not be able to do that, but you can catch up on your reading and new and proposed legislation, really with a eye on how it will impact the industry and ethics and compliance programs.
Yeah. I think too, one part of it is right now, many of us, while you're in the middle of what you're doing all day, you think about how is this impacting my job? What tasks do I have to do as a result of this? As opposed to the what does this mean? What does this mean for the bigger picture? And I can actually think about it from a more analytical, philosophical way than a looking immediately at what you need to do with it. And that must be very powerful as well.
It is. The ability to have time to think is amazing. You can actually do a deep dive on trends impacting the industry. You can take the time to network with colleagues and nurture your professional relationships. But just having time to process information is just an incredible value. And it doesn't come around often. So you really have to seize the moment.
Yeah. And you can expand potentially some of the background of outside what your traditional role is and work through those interactions too, because you actually don't just have time to learn about what you do, but the compliance adjacent worlds maybe too.
It- This is what I love. This is what I love. You can really do something radical. Radical, like taking classes or webinars related to our partners, whether it's human resources through SHRM, looking at DEI, fine tuning your management skills, looking at employee relations, and even some of those management tools associated with that, whether it's employee performance and discipline, thinking about and getting some insights on the global workforce and even things like workplace violence. So, under the HR umbrella alone, you can fill your time as you think about your next opportunity. And this even has the ability to expand what be what might be considered as your next opportunity, if you will.
There's so many areas that are, I mean, everyone's talking about AI and compliance. No one knows what to do with it right now. You could become
Right.
the expert in it.
There you go. So IT opens up a number of worlds, whether it's cybersecurity, learning more about that. For many of us, IT it's certainly not in my wheelhouse, but I need to know more. And the more I know, the better I can partner going forward with those areas. And then the more traditional departments like internal audit. I happen to have a background in accounting and auditing, but always a good time to refresh your skills. So, learning more about internal controls and fraud and abuse and auditing AI, what happens in that process and how might that be beneficial to ethics and compliance and certainly risk analysis. And it's critical to our industry.
Yeah. And one other thing that to think about is that you've talked about a lot of things that are skill building and your thought process is related to yourself as a professional. One of my favorite things during the pause is going to like a museum when it opens or taking advantage of all these other things that are interesting that you can't normally do. And
Yeah.
then you find though, the reason I'm bringing that up and then bringing it back into this conversation is it's always amazing how much they then end up influencing either conversations you have with people because you're connecting, compliance people. I mean, I think I was talking about this recently. It's not like everyone's dying to go talk about the DOJ safe harbor all the time. You're way more interested in a movie or something in your city or travel, and to take I would also say that the pause can help in those opportunities that you might, I don't know, just enjoy or a class that's completely unrelated to any of it.
I agree wholeheartedly. I have the benefit of living in our nation's capital or in that area. And I like to see and take advantage of my tax dollars at work by visiting the Smithsonian museums and all of the other freebies in town, including the Library of Congress, which is absolutely one of the best places in town. But anyway, that's just my idea. And the National Archives. But you're right. It also requires, though, creating a balance. And so when you're able to do that, when you're taking a pause and it might have, it might impact how you spend your days. And so perhaps the first half of the day might be involved with, if you're anything like me, clear eyed in the mornings, I can absolutely take in that information, whether it's on emerging legislation or trends and that type of thing and then the back half of the day, doing something fun to kind of clear out and then start all over again to the next day. Yeah.
And I think everybody, as I close off, and I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, Karen, but I would say to everyone, take some of the time. Like if your weather is nice, take that walk, go look at the sunset, take advantage of the different things that you can, because especially in difficult or on crazy times. And then regardless of anything, the holidays are coming up. So that brings up a lot, will brings up for everybody. You will
Yes.
have take some things that you enjoy and take a power of the pause for yourself. It doesn't have to be the whole life, but a few hours is always good. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you, Karen. Thanks for spending time with me and with our audience. And on behalf of the Compliance Podcast Network and Hema and me and Corporate Compliance Insights, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much.